Nagi Elhadari, originally from Chicago, but here in Los Angeles, trying to get my son back. Um, my son was born on May 29th, 2003. This is his picture here. His name's Tino. And I was married to his mother when he was born. I met her here in Los Angeles in 2002. We married, moved to Chicago, where we had our son. And immediately after he was born, she started making a lot of threats to hurt my son. She would tell me that she had thoughts and visions of hurting my son. She told this to myself, she told this to the doctors, she told this to our lawyers, and she told this to the courts. Ultimately, we got divorced in January 2005. The court awarded me sole custody and terminated her parental rights, and only gave her visitation at my sole discretion. And following our divorce, she moved back to Los Angeles. 6 months after that, I moved to Los Angeles, back to Los Angeles, came here with my son to allow her to be able to see my son whenever she wanted. It became clear and apparent that she wasn't too interested in being a mother. She wasn't interested in seeing our son. She'd come to see him once in a while, maybe once every 2 weeks, then once a month, then once every couple of months, then once a year, and to the point where she hadn't seen him for 2 years, 2.5 years, because she chose not to. I raised my son by myself solely and independently since he was born. Coming now to more recent times, April 21st, 2010, I'd been raising my son solely and independently since his birth. He was approaching 7 years old. This was a month before his birthday, where he would turn 7. I was visited by a now fired DCFS worker, Department of Children and Family Services worker, here in Los Angeles. She's no longer working for DCFS. When she came to my home, she said she was there to investigate the driving of my friend. She was there with 2 officers, Canales and Alfaro, who are now also being investigated. Just recently, I was contacted by Internal Affairs to let me know that the case regarding their perjury and assault against me and my child is being adjudicated. But something needs to happen now. So this DCFS worker was at my house for about 2 hours. She said there was no reason for her to stay ultimately, and that she had to go. I asked her why she had been there 2 hours harassing me without reason. She said she didn't like the way I talked, my attitude, or nothing about me. I asked her if it was my Chicago accent or my Egyptian accent. See, I was born in Chicago, but my family, my parents are from Egypt originally, so I do travel there, so I come back with maybe a small accent, but I'm originally born and raised in Chicago. And I asked her, what was it, my Chicago accent or my Egyptian accent? She said, I don't like nothing about you. I said, okay, then, you could leave. She had been there 2 hours, 2.5 hours. She goes to leave. The officers tell her, ma'am, we're done here. What do you want us to do? She says bye to me. I said, bye. She says, I don't like, I tell my son, say goodnight to the weirdo. I shouldn't have called her a weirdo, but I didn't swear. I didn't say any bad words. She said, I don't like his attitude, take the kid. The cops rushed towards me, and my son at this time, he's grabbing my legs saying, Daddy, Daddy, and asking me to help him. They don't ask me to put down my son, these 2 officers. What they do is they slam my head into my dining room wall, they batter ram my head into my dining room wall, knocking me out conscious immediately. This picture was taken by LAPD Sergeant Albin and given to us a year later by the city attorney's office. We had to subpoena it 3 times. The whole incident was also recorded by the LAPD. It took us a year to get the recording, but I have the transcripts of that audio recording here. So what happens in my case is they almost kill me, these officers. They tell me that I would get my son back the next day. The police department, DCFS, the DCFS worker, who once again is no longer working for DCFS, she would tell me that I would get my son back the next day, and it never happened. It's been 2 years now. And they put my son in foster care, wrongfully put him in foster care 6 months. They found abuse in the first foster home, sent him to another foster home. After 6 months, I've met at that time, I'd met with the heads of DCFS, Trish Flowen, who's now removed for the corruption and problems that she's caused to our children. I met with Antonia Jimenez, director of DCFS, in January 2011 by direction of Mike Antonovich, board of supervisor, and Andrea Orden. Antonia Jimenez said she was horrified by what they did to my son, and I would get my son back immediately. So after 6 months of my son being wrongfully put into foster care and abused and whatever else they did to him, they reinstate the parental rights of my mentally ill ex-wife, whose parental rights were terminated in the court of Cook County, Illinois in January 2005. This is a copy of my divorce order judgment, you know. It's signed by the judge, it's signed by me and my ex-wife. There's actually no way to reinstate parental rights, and by law, if anybody had a problem with that court order, they would have to challenge it in Chicago, where it was signed by the judge, and not just disregard it. DCFS just disregarded it. They didn't care where they were putting my son. They were just following the instruction of the Board of Supervisors and County Counsel Andrea Orden, which was not to let me get my son back because I have a lawsuit against them. And this is what I've been told by Board of Supervisors, employees, and investigators, why I have still not yet gotten my son back when there was no reason for my son to be taken. And everybody says I'm a great dad. So a year later, after this now removed DCFS worker came to my home, we get her to take the stand. See, the police, when they did that to me, almost killed me in front of my son. 5 hours after they falsely took me into custody, they told me that they were arresting me. 5 hours later, they told me I was being arrested for interfering with a police investigation. 148A, a misdemeanor, which I'm innocent of. You know, my son was wrongfully taken. But in that proceeding, we got the DCFS worker to testify. She didn't want to testify. She came to court accompanied by a county council member here in Los Angeles with a letter that she handed the judge. She handed the judge a letter stating that she would not want to testify. She would request that she would not be forced to testify under subpoena. Well, the judge told her she would have to testify. Even though she was no longer working for DCFS, we wanted her testimony. So she testified to the whole 2.5 hours that she was at my home, that the reason that she had taken my son is because she wanted me to sign a safety plan saying I wouldn't let my son into the car with my friend. But what she testified to is that the safety plan was blank the whole time she was at my home. There was never anything written on it. She also testified to no longer working for DCFS. She testified to taking retirement or, you know, whatever that means, whether she took retirement or was fired. It happened on the same month as my dependency proceeding where she was supposed to testify, and she never did. So she said that my son was taken because I didn't sign a safety plan that never existed. Well, if there was nothing ever written on it, it'd be illegal for me to sign, you know. I used to be a real estate agent, and I know a little bit about contracts. She also testified to her never planning on taking my son. And when she did say that she was going to take my son, that she only planned on taking him for one night. My son was never returned. The two officers also took the stand, Canales and Alfaro, the criminals they are. They also stated that there was nothing written on the safety plan, that it was blank the whole time she was there. So once again, you know, I'd like my son back, you know. And another thing these two officers did is they said the way this happened to my face, head and neck and nose and all the stuff they did to me was I slipped and hit the wall. They took the stand and told the jury, the judge and us, that I slipped and hit the wall, and that happened to my face. No way anybody could slip and hit the wall and this would happen to them. You know, I have red marks on my neck from being choked, a broken nose, flesh missing from my forehead. That flesh was missing from my forehead for over 6 months. And, you know, I'd like my son back. Recently, I received a letter telling me that Internal Affairs was still investigating the matters of those two LAPD officers. I got a letter here from a county council here in Los Angeles, Lisa Samuelson, Principal Deputy County Counsel. It's addressed to her, it's addressed to Mark Alvarado, DCFS liaison, myself, and it's from Sylvia Hernandez, Judicial Assistant to Judge Nash at the Children's Court in Monterey Park. The letter from the sergeant is just to tell me that they're currently investigating the perjury allegations against these officers, but I've been informed that the case is being adjudicated and they did find the perjury of these officers. But I want my son back. Real quick, after my son had only been gone for 6 months, I came into contact with a gentleman that told me that he would help me get my son back. His name was Rudy Bartholomew. It's Prince Capital Investments. He got word of a project that I had been doing before my son got taken away. See, before my son got taken away, I was a writer on my way to doing a project that would make the world a better place, reduce racism, and bring us all together. Well, he got word of that project, and he said he would help me get my son back. He came to my home and visited me with, I guess, this Children's Law Center employee of the Children's Court in Monterey Park, a lawyer there. She works on the 6th floor at the Children's Court in Monterey Park. Her name is Jeanette Rodriguez. Well, Jeanette came to my home with Rudy about 6 months after my son was taken. And, they said they were going to help me. And I was sitting there with Rudy. I had my manager at the time with me, Shadi. I had another assistant with me there to be present and witness to this meeting. He told me that they would help me get my son back. He told me that Jeanette Rodriguez had just had lunch with Judge Nash earlier that day, and they were talking about me and my son. And she said she would help. Rudy went and talked to me and Shadi in the other room, and he told me that he was having relations with Jeanette Rodriguez. Jeanette Rodriguez told me and my manager Shadi that she was married to one of the Black Eyed Peas band members. She worked at the courthouse as a lawyer, but she was also having relations with Judge Nash. Rudy told us in the other room that Jeanette was having sexual relations also with Judge Nash. I don't mean to be putting out all this dirt and business out there, but I want my son back. And Rudy took us in the other room, and he said that Jeanette wanted $10,000 for her to help me get my son back, that she would put my case in the hands of the right attorney that would get my son back. See, this made me, really aggravated to think that, this person would try to ask me for money when I've been fighting to get my son back who's been wrongfully taken. And the case just went on and on and on. It became really plain to see that they weren't going to let me get my son back. Not because I wasn't a great father, but because they didn't like me. There was a criminal by the name of Molly Nielsen, attorney for the child, appointed by DCFS in the Children's Court in Monterey Park. She states on the record, a couple of months after my son was taken during Ramadan 2010, that the reason she would not allow me or would not let me see my son was because Muslims are dangerous. She stated that I should not be allowed to see my son at the Islamic Center at 4th and Vermont here in Los Angeles, right next to DCFS headquarters at 425 Chateau Place, was because Muslims were dangerous. This is on the record. This was being transcribed at the time. The referee, the supposed judge that's supposed to be protecting our children in this matter, referee Sobel, reprimanded her, and she said, "How could you say that? Children are allowed to see their parents at churches for monitored visits all the time. How could you not allow him to see his son at the masjid because he's a Muslim?" They never allowed me to see my son. Actually, a couple of months after that, they terminated my visits with my son. They said it was because I wouldn't turn in my son's expired passport, showing that I took him to Egypt in 2008. I took my son to Egypt in 2008. Yeah, I did. I stayed in Egypt for 2008. That's where my family's from. I have sole custody of my son. My ex-wife has no parental rights. I had a right to take my son anywhere. So they terminated my visits with my son, and for months they would not allow me to see my son even with a monitor until I could get his expired passport. And this needs to stop. My son needs to return home. So they terminated jurisdiction in my case in March 1st, 2011. They threw my case into the family court. This criminal, Molly Nielsen, continued to harass me and tried to prevent me from getting my son back because all of our fellow employees and people that ran DCFS that lost their job because of this case. And probably fearing the loss of her job, she wanted to keep retaliation against me and my son going. She appeared at every appellate hearing on my case after DCFS terminated jurisdiction. My case went all the way to the California Supreme Court, case number CK81994. And she also contacted the child custody evaluator. We got the child custody evaluator into family court to take the stand about 2 months ago. The child custody evaluator stated on the stand in the family court, case BF 041622, that she was contacted by Molly Nielsen before she ever reached out to her. And Molly Nielsen did tell her not to help me get my son back. And Molly Nielsen had no reason to be contacting her. DCFS had already terminated jurisdiction. This family court evaluator testified to this being not normal procedure for DCFS, attorney for the child, to contact them after the case had already been terminated. And it was just evident to see that this criminal, Molly Nielsen, is continuing to try to prevent my son from coming home. All I want is my son back. My son should be able to come back home. He's been begging and trying to come back home since this case started. My name, Nagi Elhadari, N-A-G-I, last name Elhadari, E-L-H-A-D-A-R-Y. If you Googled my name, you'd see all the interviews and Board of Supervisors transcripts. All the Board of Supervisors meetings here in Los Angeles are videotaped. You'll see all my testimony before the Board of Supervisors. If you go online, I've also set up an Indiegogo account where I've put all the transcripts regarding my case on there. Once again, these transcripts that took us a year to get. That was the recording of my son being kidnapped by the LAPD and this now fired DCFS worker. It's online when you Google my name. It comes up under my Indiegogo account, Justice for Tino. Please contact me. Please contact Los Angeles. And please help me get my son back home. I'd like to get him back while he's still, while he's still alive. He does not look like this anymore. I'd like to get him back home. Please help.